lawful solutions for Moors, Blackamoors, Moorish-Americans, Black Indians, African Americans, Moorish subjects, and all other naturalized or colonized colored people.
Peace and greetings, everyone who's tuning in. My name is Amir Hassan El. I am the Vice Prime Minister for the Empire of Morocco and also the Wazir for the colonial state of Oregon. Today, we have the honor of sitting down with our Majesty, the Sultan of the Empire of Morocco. Our goal is to continue to an open and honest conversation about nationality, sovereignty, decolonization, and the future of the empire. Your Majesty, thank you very much for taking your time out to sit with us and have this conversation. How are you doing today?
Islam, man, I'm doing good. It's always a pleasure to sit down, with you, Wazir, as well as, get the opportunity, to educate the Moors on our Moroccan nationality, as well as what's going on in the empire in general.
Okay, great. I have a few questions. Let me start off with this question. A lot of people who are not familiar with being Moorish, Moroccan, most people that look like you and me call themselves Black, African American, and so on and so forth. So if one of the Blackamoors or more decided they want to become a national of the Empire of Morocco, what is that process for them? What do they need to do?
Islam, and I thank you for the question. Well, to really be honest, it's really very simple. It's a matter of pledging your allegiance to the Empire of Morocco in accordance with Article 15, Paragraph 1 of the Treaty of Madrid. So, whatever colonial charter state that you stay in, you would just, if it's a Moroccan state located within that jurisdiction, you would pretty much just reach out to them, let them know that you understand that you're Moroccan, you want to pledge your allegiance to the Empire of Morocco. And then, the process will basically start, with you filling out the proper application or documentation. And, the process will start with you renouncing your United States citizenship. And the two particular documents are your oath and allegiance and your renunciation of your United States citizenship. And, it's really a simple process. If I had to say anything is the most difficult, it would just be, understanding, really what's taking place when you decide to fill these documents out, really understanding that you are Moroccan from a lawful perspective. So, but, it's really a simple process.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Anyone can become a Moroccan national if they have a phenotype such as you or myself?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, great. That's good. The internal state, they have to go through the internal state, or can they go to the empire directly?
That's another good question, Wazir. They have to go through an internal Moroccan state. And the reason that, that is the Empire of Morocco, or just say Inner Morocco. Inner Morocco is, where the office of the Sultan is. So we'll say if it's a Moor in Wyoming, they decide to petition straight to the Empire of Morocco, but there isn't an internal Moroccan state located in Wyoming. They wouldn't be able to petition the Empire of Morocco directly because it's not a state there to govern them. So, everyone has to be governed. So without an internal Moroccan state being located wherever you're geographically located, then, you wouldn't be able to petition straight to the Empire of Morocco. You would need to go through that internal Moroccan state first. And that would be your liaison or connection to the Empire of Morocco.
Okay. So a person living in Wyoming, I think is what you said, what they would do possibly is start a government there. Is that a possibility? Could they do that?
Right. Yeah. And that is another option. I didn't actually point that out, but just say from based on that example, if it's not an internal Moroccan state there, that particular individual can get 3 to 5 people and they can establish an internal Moroccan state there in Wyoming. And once they begin to start the process and decolonize that territory, then all Moors that's geographically located within Wyoming, then they would have to come through that internal Moroccan state to get access to the Empire of Morocco and the protections.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Now, this question is for people who are possibly interested in becoming Moroccans and going through the process. I think I asked you earlier, can anybody with a phenotype or who consider themselves Black, Negro, African American, can they become Moroccan nationals? And you said, yeah. Now, to further understand this question, because I'm thinking that there are some people going to be watching this video and they're going to have that same question. And I would think, just like most other countries, the state of the Empire of Morocco has the right to affirm or deny. Is that correct? Citizenship.
Well, that's the other part too. Yes, all people with the same phenotype, as myself and you, they can, have a right to petition Empire Morocco to gain nationality. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's actually up to, the state. The state decides, who gets the nationality and who doesn't. And, that principle is exercised all over the world. The Moors out there, if you just do your research, there's so many, examples of, a person getting denied nationality from a particular state. So, as the Wazir just brought up, that is a point of view that, has to be considered. So, it's really like on a case-by-case basis. Once you begin to go through the nationalization process, dealing with the Empire of Morocco, because there is a background check involved, before you actually lawfully gain your nationality from the Empire of Morocco. So you are absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. Next question. When those people who become nationals to the internal state, what would their responsibilities be to as a national of that of the Empire of Morocco? Do they have certain responsibilities, or once they become nationals, are they able to continue their jobs that they have or continue their business that they're running? And to those businesses, are they still under the United States? How does that work for them?
Thank you for the question. And that's a multi-dimensional question. But once you proclaim your nationality through the Empire of Morocco and you lawfully have your nationality, to be honest, nothing really just absolute, it changes. And I guess this is a good time for me to point this out. You hear a lot of Moors speak about public and private affairs. This is when this concept, it really comes to life. And the all caps name, being a business or, from that perspective. So that name and that entity, it still will be relevant. You will still do business with it. You will still, start business with it, get house loans, cars, etc. But, in the private, in your private affairs or your Moroccan national side, that it has its place too. So as an example, say a Moor, he buys a piece of property, and we all know, it's certain instruments that you need. So we'll say if you have a driver's license or you need your social security card to make this transaction to purchase this home. So the Moor, he purchased the property, and 6 months down the line, he gets a notice in the mail. It says, well, hey, you owe X amount of property taxes. Now, we'll take it a step further and we'll say, if the Empire of Morocco has legislation protecting any Moroccan national that buys property within the United States jurisdiction, that access tax does not apply to them, then that's when the Moroccan national side kicks in. So that particular Moor, due to Moroccan legislation being passed, that particular Moor wouldn't be held accountable for the notice that he has with the access tax. So, it's kind of like it's a shared jurisdiction and, it's somewhat of a dual nationality. Really, to be honest, Moors have always had dual nationality. They just didn't understand, properly really how it worked. A lot of Moors, they look at dual nationality as if, the United States laws don't apply. And in certain situations, that can be true. But the rule of law and law in general, it's a universal principle. And you can't ask for anything that you're not willing to give. So, that's another paradigm shift or understanding that Moors will have to come into understanding, how Moroccan nationality works within the United States jurisdiction.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Okay, Sultan, can you tell me what's the most common mistake people make when they're trying to assert treaty protections? A lot of Moroccans or Moorish-Americans go in front of the court and they try to say, well, according to this treaty, I don't have to do this or you can't do that. Can you explain that for me, how they are using these treaties for protection?
Islam. Well, man, today, man, I've seen so many eras of, Moors trying to enforce the language of a treaty, within domestic jurisdiction. And, last time we spoke about this kind of briefly, but Moors have to understand first and foremost that treaties are non-self-executing. And when a Moor tries to individually enforce the language of a treaty or the treaty provisions, they don't understand that it's a certain legal procedure that goes with enforcing treaties, as well as, the proper written instruments with the proper officials' names on them. But, if I can sum it up, I would just say, Moors trying to enforce the language of the treaty in an individual capacity, as well as, attaching their own entity to the language of a treaty. A person will have a church representing them speaking on the language of a treaty when the church or temple is not the proper entity that is in alignment with a treaty. Only states can make treaties and treaty agreements with other states. And, this is a universal principle. Every competent court around planet Earth, they understand this. So, as an example of an individual Moor, he takes a document within court and he says, okay, well, hey, I'm Moroccan, right? And the court is looking at the document, but they see a church's name or a temple name on the document. That's a red flag right there automatically. Then the next step would be, okay, you're saying that you're a Moroccan national. The Moor never has any documentation from the competent authority or representatives of the state. And I can go on and on, about it. But, if I can, again, sum it up, it would just be Moors trying to enforce the language of a treaty or a treaty in an individual capacity.
Okay. So, you were talking about documentation from the Empire of Morocco, and that documentation identifies Moors as nationals of the Empire of Morocco. With that, it gives them protections through the Empire of Morocco or their internal state. No, not the internal state. The Empire of Morocco is the ones providing that protection. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I know I can see some Blackamoors trying to question how can the United States, why would they honor the treaties? So if a Moroccan gets in trouble with a U.S. law enforcement officer, how will those protections come about? The reason I'm asking this question is because like I said, I can see, some Blackamoors or even, other Moroccans who don't understand or don't know that they're Moroccans, trying to challenge the understanding of how can the Empire of Morocco, who, as far as they know, is very early in its development. That's what they think. They don't know the history of the Empire of Morocco. So I guess my question is, can you explain the Treaty of Peace and Friendship and Articles 2021 and how that would affect the Moroccan going in front of the court, possibly, if you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, Islam. Okay, I'll take that question from the top. The 1836 Treaty of Peace and Friendship between, the Empire of Morocco and the United States, Article 2021. Those particular articles, they speak about the Moorish consular court. And, any dispute between an American and a Moroccan, the Moorish consular court would be the proper venue to settle this dispute. And, it goes back to the proper documentation. And Moors not understanding this concept or the context of the treaties will take documents into a domestic court speaking about the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, but asking this domestic United States courts to settle the dispute. But according to the treaties, it's the Moorish consular court that settles the dispute. And, that's just a misconception, again, that Moors have, as well as what I spoke about from a procedural standpoint. When you try to enforce the language of a treaty, it changes the whole procedures that takes place within a domestic court. But, to take it a step further, the United States of America, the United Nations, as well as every colonial charter state were located within the United States, they already have noticed who the competent authority, who they are within the Empire of Morocco. They know that I'm the Sultan. They know that Dre Bey, he's the Prime Minister. They know that J. Jermaine Bey, he's the Chief Council Court Judge of the Empire. They know that Makar El, she's the Speaker of the House of the Empire of Morocco. But, they got this notice by way of the properly written instrument and the proper procedures of law. So the next step would be, as an example, a Moor who is not affiliated with the Empire of Morocco. This particular Moor, he takes documentation into a domestic court and says, you know what, I'm a Moroccan national. But the document that he has, it has none of the competent authorities' name on it. Again, it's none of the properly written instruments, such as a preliminary objection or, a state of facts, an oath and allegiance, a renunciation document, a full powers letter, just, recognition letter from the Sultan. They have none of these documents. But, the point that I'm making, once you are a de jure Moroccan national and you make these claims within United States domestic courts, these are the documents that you need, as well as the procedure of the litigation that's taking place. It will change the whole procedure. The court case will get transferred to the Moorish Consular Court. But back to your original question, with the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, the procedure that I'm pointing out with the case being transferred to the Moroccan Consular Court is in alignment with the 1836 Treaty of Peace and Friendship, because the United States has already recognized the Moorish Consular Court as the proper venue with any dispute between an American and a Moroccan. It's very important Moors understand, what I'm explaining right now. And, I don't want any of the Moors to be clueless, as if the, Europeans or the United States, they don't understand what I just explained. So when you go in there without the proper written documents, to create a different procedure, they already know that you don't understand what's going on, and your claim is null and void.
Mm-hmm.
Are you?
Okay. Thank you for that answer. But I just want to say that those who are not Moroccan with the proper paperwork are much like Dred Scott. He's in the improper venue. Yes, I was thinking about how those who do not have their national paperwork with the Empire of Morocco and they go into the colonial courts, they're simply Dred Scott because they're in the wrong venue. Um, well, I say they're in the wrong venue based off of their phenotype, but they were naturalized and therefore they are in the correct venue. What do you think about that? Because uh, when Dred Scott was told that he was plaintiff in error, they were saying that he was in the wrong venue, I believe. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I thank you for the question, and that is exactly, what they told Dred Scott. But I like to point out that, as you said, a lot of us are Dred Scott right now to this day, and why is that? Dred Scott, he didn't know that he was Moroccan. The court knew that he was Moroccan, but he didn't identify as Moroccan. He identified as, a Negro. But what makes that so significant, I'll say 80% of the Moors, on planet Earth right now, and you can look online, they understand that they're Moors. So, they have a step ahead of Dred Scott. But, the thing about the Moors in the 21st century, they don't understand how to enforce the contract. And, as always, man, I got to give a shout out, to Jay Bey. This is what, he taught us. Mm-hmm. He taught us the 4 elements of a contract. Number 1, the parties must be known. Number 2, who's superior and who's inferior. Number 3, what are the terms and conditions? And number 4, how do you enforce the contract? And, that principle was so monumental to me because it put me in a perspective to where when I read the documents, the treaties, or, any master contract, it was certain things that I was able to identify that I, couldn't identify at first. But my point in bringing the 4 elements of a contract up is because Moors can't get past the first box. They say, okay, well, yeah, I'm a Moor. But then they turn around and say, okay, well, I'm Moorish-American. They say that I'm a Moor. Then, some may say, okay, but, I know I'm Indian. And, not understanding from the strict legal context, you're naming 2 different jurisdictions. You're naming, 2 different statuses and class of people. And, these names, they have different rights that come up under the classification. But, Moors, again, they have a head up on Dred Scott because they already know that they're Moors. Now they just need to understand the 4 elements of a contract so they can learn how to properly enforce the contract and get the rights and protections that are due to the jure Moroccan nationals of the Empire of Morocco.
Okay, yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, that Dred Scott, to me, was a very significant case because it kind of showed him that he was in the wrong place, but they didn't tell him what venue he's supposed to be in. They didn't tell him that he was a Moroccan and he should be over there at the consular court. Again, they didn't tell him that because they didn't want all the other slaves to know that either. And then therefore they lose their slaves. That's my opinion. But thank you for your answer. Okay. I've heard many people talk about how the Moors can't be trusted because they help sell blacks or Africans into slavery. And we get that a lot. How do you respond to that?
Man, that's a very good question. I have seen that discussion online, here recently.
Hmm.
And what I would say to the people, what you have to realize, you have good Moors and you have bad Moors, and unfortunately, some of the bad Moors, they did participate, you know, in slavery at one time, in unison with the Europeans and the colonizers. But at the same time, you had Moors that had integrity, Moors that stood up for the people and, respected the people and fought for freedom. And, myself and the Empire of Morocco here in the 21st century, that's what we represent. We represent, bringing freedom, integrity, truthfulness, and transparency to the people. And, we're here to stand for the people. And if, anyone, you do your research, about decolonization, what that entails and, how does it benefit a people, the signs are very easy to see that, we're standing up for the people. I don't think a lot of people are aware that, we're putting a lot on the line, taking the steps that we're taking, to decolonize, to get everyone their freedom or their sovereignty back. And, we're not your average group of Moors. A lot of Moors are not properly educated. So, they can't see the significance of what we're doing. But, the United States, they understand clearly, what we're doing. They understand the significance of it. And they understand, how it's going to benefit all Moors on planet Earth. So this is a very serious thing, that we're doing. And, we're not doing what the other group of Moors that you may see online, having these discussions, about church and, 501c3s and, these type of things or UCCs. We're an actual real government, with judicial power. The Empire of Morocco, the judicial branch, it has power to prosecute, to sentence, to confiscate land, to, adjudicate individuals. This is a very serious thing. And, I just want Moors to, understand that this is the real deal. Whether you understand that now or you understand it, in the future. But, from the United States of America perspective, they know who we are and they know what we represent. And, they know the power that we have within our hands since we took the step to bring the Empire of Morocco out of a shallow grave. I yield.
Sultan, um, I want to ask you, what is the difference between the Empire of Morocco and the nations of Africa and the islanders who were able to decolonize in the early 60s? What's the difference between them and Morocco, the Empire of Morocco today?
Islam, thank you for the question. For the first and foremost, I want to point out we're the first group of people to decolonize on the same landmass as the colonies. So, I'll use France, and Burkina Faso, as an example. France wasn't geographically located there, even though they did have settler colonialism going on there, and they did have, some French there, but that wasn't, their main land. So, we're here in America and, the Americans, they are here with us. But not only that, I want to point out, the 12 signatory powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Belgium, Spain, the United States of America, France, Great Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Russia. These particular countries, they signed a treaty with the Empire of Morocco, which put the Empire of Morocco and the Moors in a superior position. What do I mean when I say superior position? Any litigation or dispute between these two countries, the Empire of Morocco is in a superior position because treaties are supreme law of the land. and they recognize as our laws as the supreme law. But to step into your next question, we are the first group of people to decolonize with treaties. The African states that you mentioned, or the islanders, they decolonize, with Charter of the United Nations, resolutions, Resolution 1514, Resolution 1541. But not only did we use those particular resolutions as well as the charter, but we're actually decolonizing with prior treaty agreements. And it puts us, automatically in a superior position, where, the African states, or, Puerto Rico as an example. Yes, Puerto Rico has started the decolonization process. They have got some ways, but the relationship with them in the United States is starting from the beginning, right? Puerto Rico is not automatically in a superior position when it comes to self-determination or independence of a people. So, us decolonizing and us, having the treaties that we're decolonizing with on top of the resolutions that I named, it puts us in a superior position that, no other group of people on planet Earth are in, or can be in. I hear a lot of Moors say, oh, we're the first people. But once you understand contract law and, the importance of the treaties put us in the original people position, based on how they're structured, based on the control that we have over the land and the resources, just, from a magnitude of, different perspectives. But, just to answer your question, those are the two main things that's difference between us and the Africans and the islanders. We're decolonizing on the same landmass as the colonists, as well as we're decolonizing with treaties that put us in a superior position immediately. Immediately it put us in a superior position and gave us jurisdiction over those 12 signatory powers that I named, and particularly the United States of America.
Okay, great. Sultan, I want to ask you, how are treaties used in diplomacy today, and how does that compare to how they were used in the past?
Islam. Well, treaties and diplomacy in the past, they were used pretty much after wars, right? Once the war pretty much took place, diplomatic relations was set forth, and a treaty would come about to say, okay, well, hey, we're not going to treat each other, in the way that we just did before we had the war. This particular piece of territory, you're welcome to it. Just friendly relations. But, in the 21st century, treaties are used to reiterate what was already agreed upon within the past, as well as, treaties and international law. It has evolved over the years. And, the treaties that were made in the past, as time went on, and evolution, it continued. The international realm, it was created. As everyone knows, the United Nations, it came into existence in 1945. Some of our treaties, they were agreed upon or written prior to 1945. But, with that evolution, international law in this system, it came about, to enforce treaties and agreements amongst states or, different cultures of people. And, diplomacy, today, it has came a long way, but I still can't say, based on my studies, diplomacy and, the messenger, coming and speaking, that concept has always been there, so it always been some type of diplomatic relations and, some type of cordial conversation or communication that, took place between two people who may not be seeing eye to eye. And, that's what diplomacy is, to be an upright and a stand-up diplomat. You have to see both sides of the spectrum and, be able to agree to disagree, but, to maintain peace, on behalf of, the nationals or, the people of whatever respective state who may not be into politics. But, that's the main thing as far as, diplomacy, enforcing the treaties, things, again, that, it was a compromise on either side, but we're going to come to this compromise, to keep peace, amongst our two nations. So, I'll yield with that question.
Okay. Let me ask you this. How is the diplomacy now with the United States and the other 12 or 11 signatories?
It's cordial, and I'm glad you asked that question. What a lot of people don't understand, especially Moors, that see us, taking the steps that we're taking, because they have so many questions, about the United States, what has the United States said to you all, or, what have the 12 signatory powers that they said. When you're doing what we're doing, for one, it's a big process. And for two, it's a lot that, the other signatory powers or states, they have to, physically see to see if, the Moors are really serious. We played so many games for so long to where, we have to prove ourselves. We have to prove ourselves that we're ready to self-govern, that we're ready to, officially get in diplomatic relations. And, we can have, this grown conversation about this land and this territory, and respect each other. And, that stage, that's kind of the stage that we're at right now with formally getting into, having this conversation, with the United States or the 12 signatory powers. But, it takes a lot to get to that point. Does that mean that, everything, that we may put online or some of the things we speak about is not happening? No, that doesn't mean that. It's a lot happening. But again, it's a process getting to, the table to meet with other nations when you've been missing for so long, as well as, it's a lot of muddy water, out there, as we said earlier about good and bad Moors, that's out there about the Moors, and Moors, we can't just point the finger. We can't be the one pointing the finger like, none of everything that happened is not our fault. We had a part to play, in our demise, in our falling, whether, Moors were in cahoots with the Europeans, to make the Moors stay asleep as long as they did, as well as, right now, Moors don't want to adhere to the treaties. Moors, all day they parade online saying that they're Moroccan, but they're not having any pledged their allegiance to the Empire of Morocco in accordance with Article 15, Paragraph 1 of the treaties. So from that perspective, when you're dealing with the United States or another signatory power, as a Moor, they're looking at your treaty saying, okay, you haven't even followed your own treaty to come back into your Moroccan nationality, but you want us to treat you like you a Moor. So, it's two sides to the coin, mm-hmm. and Moors have to, they just have to step up, and look at this in a mature fashion. If they really want to self-govern and they really want their Moroccan nationality. I can't say it's a lot of misconceptions about, what it actually is to be a Moroccan national. From the point in time that I came back into my nationality of being a Moroccan national, learning the principles of international law, it's a lot different than what I actually imagined in my mind. The work, that it takes to, learn international law, the way that I have to project myself in the public, because I understand that I'm at a higher status quo than, the average person who may not understand this information. So, it's a lot of responsibility, being a de jure Moroccan national. But in the end, all the hard work and the dedication and the discipline, that it takes to change oneself, it's all worth it. It's all worth it, to be in a superior position. I think the saying is, a lot is required to one that a lot is given. So, if you want a lot, it's going to take a lot to maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
A year.
So then since we're talking about treaties and modern diplomacy, would you say that treaties are more legal or more political today?
Uh, Man, that's a really good question. You know, I would say twofold, but due to the Moors absent, I would say treaties have and international contracts that took more of a political road versus legal, even though the legal aspect is there. Um, but from what I see from the international community, you know, they're kind of being biased, when it comes to decide the deal with the legal aspect or the political aspect. But there are a lot of states, and and I'll even say the ICJ. The ICJ, that institution, it stands by the rule of law. Even though some states, they may try to deal with it in a political aspect. But it's really, to be honest, it's twofold though. And it just really depends on the group of people or the state at the time. Whatever dispute is going on. Far as the United States, I see them, trying to deal with, a lot of issues politically and, sideswipe, the legal aspect of it. When some states, I see them, deal with it more on a legal aspect. So, it's just kind of twofold. But, me personally, in the Empire of Morocco, we deal with things more from a legal standpoint, even though we are competent enough to understand the political aspect, about some situations. But, the rule of law is the rule of law, and there's really no in between, when it comes to law. And, I mean, me personally, I would like to see, states get back, to that aspect. The law is the law. The politics, that can be set on the side. But, the law has to be upheld, and the law, it keeps order, it keeps order and it keeps things organized, and it keeps everything on a level or equal playing field. But, that's what, I would like to see the world go in the future, when it comes to the rule of law and the political aspect. The political aspect, it just kind of seems like it's more games, stall, deny, and defend that comes from the political aspect versus on, the rule of law, the black and white letter, hey, this is what it say and that's what it is. I
Right.
yield.
Yeah, I understand that, with the rule of law, it protects states also, from one country invading another. If that country who invades follows the rule of law, they wouldn't do those things, or kidnapping another dignitary, those kind of things is not inside the rule of law. Uh, so yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate that. Okay, Sultan, I want to talk about the empire structure. What role does the internal states play within that structure of the empire?
Well, first and foremost, the Empire of Morocco is a centralized government, and the internal states, I guess you could say, they play their part of, governing the several geographical locations, outside of where the actual empire, is. I think we spoke about that the last interview we have, difference between the kingdom and the empire.
Hmm.
Empire, it crosses borders. So, due to the empire crossing borders at such a broad space, it needs states or it needs governments, all over this geographical landmass. So, as an example, I'm in Texas. The internal state here in Dempsey, it will govern all the Moors that are here in this landmass. You're in Oregon. Your particular internal Moroccan states, it governs that particular landmass. You're the governor of New Mecca. You deal with the governor of Oregon, as well as, the municipalities, all the counties, townships. So, with your internal Moroccan states, it governs all those entities within. Because again, if the empire is quote unquote geographically, the main hub located somewhere else, as an example, the District of Columbia, but then, it governs all the 50 Union states. You need people, or you need some type of administration in those locations to govern, over the landmass and everything within. So that's a very important part that the internal states of the Empire of Morocco, they play, as well as the main thing, it brings the Moroccan nationality to that particular jurisdiction. Because, as an example that we have in Wyoming, if it's not a government there, the particular Moor that may have watched impact study sessions or ran into this information, they don't have access to get their Moroccan nationality unless, as we came up with, they have to start an actual internal Moroccan state. So internal Moroccan state, it has a variety of duties, that it holds. But again, one of the main things is, being able to govern over the landmass and everything within, as well as the grant Moroccan nationality to the Moors geographically located there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we were talking about earlier a Moor living in Wyoming, and now that he has more, Wyoming is now a internal state. I don't know what we call it, but anyway, how would the protections look like for the Moroccans in that territory?
Okay, that's a good question. In the example that we use, Wyoming, if that particular that particular internal Moroccan state were to have some type of litigation, with the colonial charter state of Wyoming, due to it being an internal Moroccan state there, that Moor can now, that he has his, Moroccan nationality through the state, he can petition that internal Moroccan state and get representation by way of the state. Now, we'll look at it both sides. Just say if the state wasn't there again, and that particular Moor, he wanted Moroccan nationality. And, this goes back to why, they couldn't petition the Empire of Morocco directly and become a national, because again, there's no administration there to oversee or protect the Moors.
Right.
But that Moor would petition that internal Moroccan state, will get representation. The Council General will step in and begin to litigate, or correspond with whatever jurisdiction or court that the dispute is in. And, he would send correspondence to the judge, to the prosecutor, to the court in general, as well as contact, the state of Wyoming and, try to come to some type of resolve. And, depending on what happens within that process, the next step would be, to get the actual centralized government or the Empire of Morocco involved that would directly start to correspond with the United States and, their representatives, President Trump, Marco Rubio, etc.
Okay. Thank you for that. Sultan, I've been watching on YouTube and other social media, seeing Moorish-Americans and others who are driving with their own license plates and their own IDs, driver's license IDs that they made, and they're being harassed and getting their cars towed and having to go to court for fictitious license or license plates. How is the Empire of Morocco government getting around that?
Islam. Well, first and foremost, it's the state. The Empire of Morocco is an actual state. It has the authority to issue governmental identification as well as license plates.
Mm-hmm.
The Empire of Morocco, every month, it sends notification out to the United Nations as well as to the United States and the colonial charter states about, new license plates and identifications that are being issued to new Moroccan nationals, that may join the Empire of Morocco, one of the internal states. I want to also speak about, a diplomatic list. It's a diplomatic list. This list also goes out every month, to the United Nations as well as to the United States and the several colonial states. But what takes place is, not only do they get this list, but it's actual legislation that has to be passed within the Empire of Morocco, to make this legal. I want to point that out too. Nothing just happens. We're not running around here just making things up as we go. Anything that we do, it's a legislative process that has to take place, before things come into existence. I also want to point out, we're getting ready to issue new empire level identification and license plates. So those will be coming out pretty soon. But, the reason why, the Moors that you initially spoke about are having the problems that they're having, it's a lack of being competent. Without the procedure that I named, the proper notice going out from the proper party, which is the Empire of Morocco, and those officials that may sit on the transportation committee, the director. Without those proper documents coming out for those particular organs of the Empire of Morocco, you're basically outside the law. You're just an individual trying to do, what a state does. You as an individual, you can't create your own identification. You can't make your own license plates. Only a state can issue those instruments. And that's the reason the Moors are having the problems that they're having, because they're trying to individually do something that only a state can do. And, again, that's why I encourage, all Moors, proclaim your nationality with the Empire of Morocco. Once you proclaim your nationality with the Empire of Morocco, everything that a state has to offer, you'll get that from the Empire of Morocco. You can stop trying to operate in an individual capacity. And, one thing I learned about coming in this, you take care of the state and the state gonna take care of you. So, Moors have to learn to, have patriotism, repatriate back to your mother country, take care of your mother country, your country that'll take care of you. Really, to be honest about it, IDs and license plates, that's really on a small scale of the grand spectrum. Those are just byproducts of, dealing with a state, period. It's just like in the United States. They got DPS offices, in every colonial charter state. You can get identification and you can get, license plates. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with the Empire of Morocco. Us being a state, we can issue those instruments, for the nationals of the state or government officials.
Okay, thank you. Sultan, tell me, what do you see the future of the empire in the next 10 to 20 years? Or what do you like to see it at as far as recognition, as far as diplomacy, and also as far as the other nations of the world? How do you see us being involved in expanding?
Islam. Thank you for the question, man. In the next 10 to 20 years, I see the empire, for one, doing, wonderful things. I see the empire, taking its rightful place, amongst nations. I would like to see the empire, get in a position of trust. The Moors, we have to understand, we have to clean, the things we did in the past. We have to clean that up. Mm-hmm. And, with that, it's going to take a lot of work. But with that work, to add to what you said, the next 10 to 20 years, it'll put us in a position where, we'll be governing back over the empire. We'll be, collecting taxes. We'll have diplomatic relations, with all countries on planet Earth. And, they'll understand that the Empire of Morocco and the Moors there, they can be trusted. They have integrity. They're going to do the right thing. And, that's one of the main things, where I would like to see the Empire of Morocco, in the next 10 to 20 years, as well as, all people who identify as Black, African American, for them to 100% understand that their true nationality is Moroccan, and they come back home, to their mother country. And, I feel, with that, peace, peace will come up on the earth. We'll be able to bring peace. People can feel safe. They can feel, comfortable, knowing that the rule of law is going to be enforced. And, we're going to call balls and stripes, and we're going to just be fair, fair with everyone. Being that the Empire of Morocco, is really in a superior, position. Our job was to govern over the Empire of Morocco, to settle disputes, between the European states. It's been so many wars that have took place since we have been absent from the world stage. And a lot of those wars, they wouldn't have happened, if we was in our proper place. So, I look to, maintain world peace. I look to have, the empire have diplomatic relations, with all countries on planet Earth, whether small or big, and, just bring peace, no matter, where it is. A home is not a home if it doesn't have peace.
Right.
So, I just want to bring peace to the world and maintain peace. And, I'm confident in the Empire of Morocco in the next 10 to 20 years. It'll be able to be that beacon of light and bring that peace to humanity, wherever they may be on planet Earth.
Okay, well, thank you. Sultan, thank you for your time, your insight, and your continued leadership. This conversation is very helpful in helping bring clarity to the subject of nationality, sovereignty, and international law, the future direction of the empire. I really want to say thank you for your time, and I look forward to our next interview. And